and welcome. You're watching Head to Head on UATV and I'm Oles Gerjuk. Today's discussion is about the achievements and challenges of the Ukrainian science and research. Joining us in the studio is Maxym Strikha, Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Hello and thank you for being with us.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
So, Mr. Strikha, what are the hottest topics being researched in Ukraine these days?
We are still on the top of the list in many items, and it's quite easy to see this list of items using some indicators of Scopus or Web of Science databases. We are very good in theoretical physics, in material science, in biotechnologies, in mathematics, in some branches of agriculture, in aerospace, in many aspects of experimental physics, etc., etc., etc. Of course, we have many problems because of the lack of funding, and that's really a gravest problem of Ukrainian R&D system today.
This is the main challenge, right?
Yes, that's the main challenge, although the other challenge is that up to now we had practically an unreformed Soviet system. It was very efficient in Soviet times. We still have a Soviet system of the Academy of Sciences, which was created finally some 30 years ago, and which was very effective in serving the purposes of so-called planned economy of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic.
Could you please explain to our audience what does this Soviet style, Soviet method of science mean?
Well, if we'll look now at the system of Ukrainian science, we'll see that it's really divided in different spheres. We have the sector of university, R&D, and it's more or less like we have everywhere. But this sector makes only about 10% of general figure of funding of R&D in Ukraine. 60% of R&D funding in Ukraine is the National Academy of Science of Ukraine. And really the structure is a little bit, let's say, traditional, because what does it mean? That the state delegates, the government delegates 60% of its public funding for R&D to the corporation of approximately 600 persons who elect themselves and who control themselves. They're not controlled by state, and they perform the policy in this sector. And the problem is that, unfortunately, it happens so that the administrators of this system are very, very old. The president of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, Professor Paton, is 99 now.
99 years old.
Yes, 99. He was born on 27th of November of 1918, on the same day when the first meeting of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine took place. And the two first vice presidents of the National Academy of Sciences are a little bit below 80 and over 80. And the average age of the members of the National Academy of Science board is over 70.
Over 70 years old.
Over 70 years old. And really that makes a problem, because I can say that sometimes we can see in media that they are corrupted, etc. They're not corrupted in...
Are they productive enough in this age?
They are devoted to science, but they live in the previous era, and they have no chances, in fact, to understand that the matters had changed. That the system around the National Academy of Sciences is quite different than it was.
And the needs of people
and the
are
needs
changed.
are quite different, and that makes a great problem, because, in fact, they can't be very effective in just communicating with the parliament, with the government, because they're very old, they can speak the same language, and they can't be very effective in fighting for public money. Because the young administrators are very pragmatic. They say, if you are so old, then why should we give you public money? Mm-hmm. And that's, but finally, it's a great problem, not for those very old persons, but for many young persons in the institutions of the Academy of Sciences, which have no money and which have to practically change their field of activity, emigrate to other countries with a better system of R&D. And that's a very great challenge for us now.
Because they don't see any prospect in Ukraine.
Because in many cases they don't see any prospect in Ukraine because their salary is low, but not only salary, they have no chances in many fields to work on the modern level. I have told you that we are good in many spheres, but our experimental equipment is very old-fashioned. And sometimes...
It's still from the Soviet era, right?
Not only, of course, because despite all the problems, we manage sometimes to get new good equipment through different channels, but generally, in many fields, we can't work in modern level just because of the lack of modern equipment. Because modern equipment is expensive, and unfortunately, Michael Faraday times when it was possible to make very important experiments just with very simple things had passed away and forever. And now we need very complicated and very expensive equipment, and that's a problem for Ukraine.
But then how does the National Academy of Ukraine allocates this 60% of financing?
Generally, they try to preserve everything that existed 30 years ago. And sometimes, and that means that very good institutions which work really at rather high level get the same money as the institutions which are working at very low level and which were organized some 50 years ago in order to serve the purposes of some branches of Ukrainian planned economy. But those branches do not exist any longer, but the institutions still work and still get the same money at the good institutions.
But then what could the Ministry of Education do about it? Maybe
nothing,
there is some chance...
Nothing, in fact, because according to our law, we have no really mechanisms to influence the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. It's quite autonomous. It gets its money and it's do everything they wish with their money. Mm-hmm. There is a new institution, really, which can. That's the National Council on the Development of Science and Technologies, presided by the Prime Minister himself. And it's constructed of two chambers, let's say. The Scientific Council, composed by 24 prominent Ukrainian scientists, leaders in different branches, that they are selected in an open contest according to very sophisticated procedure by the Identification Committee, which is composed of 3 Ukrainian and 6 prominent Western scientists. So we have a good scientific committee, and we have another committee in this council, administrative, which is composed of the representatives of the stakeholders in this field, the representatives of the ministry involved in R&D activities, the academies, and I am the deputy chairman of this administrative chamber. That's a new body which has theoretical possibility to influence the situation. And now it's quite obvious that we should do something, we should modernize the situation because it's very old-fashioned, and it's not effective. However, it's a complicated thing because academy is very traditional and of course it will oppose any attempts of reform.
Of course, but how could you influence the situation? And maybe there are some new legislative initiatives that must be discussed.
We have a new law on science and technology, so although it was a kind of compromise and it was more or less like the British electional reform of the year of 1832. It was a step in a good direction, but not a very great step, because at that time it was adopted 3.5 years ago, and it was just a matter of compromise. And now,
compromise for what?
Compromise between, let's say, some kind of revolutionary groups who wish to change everything at once, and traditionalist groups which believe that we shouldn't change anything. And of course, we decided to really introduce some new rules in some sectors. For example, a new body would be established, a national research council for grant funding of top researchers in all the fields. And it's good. But on the same time, very few changes were introduced in the system of the National Academy of Sciences, and the National Academy of Sciences, it happened so, is the principal body for this structure. So it's really
frustrating.
This law was very important, and it was, and it's still good, but it's probably not the final step on the way of reforming of Ukrainian R&D system.
But who is blocking this? Is there any way to change this? Do MPs support you, for example?
Well, generally, unfortunately, the majority of MPs are not very much interested in this topic, and many of them also have a very, let's say, bad idea on science in Ukraine in general, because they know that Patton is still a president and he is 99, and that means that there is no good science in Ukraine at all. It's not so. We have really good science, and we have to support it. And we still have to really change public opinion. We should bring an understanding that we still have very good things, and we are still on the top of the list in many spheres. And now we are doing very much, for example, for our defense, because when Russia had invaded, nobody, for example, agreed to sell us drones, as you remember. And, for example, due to our scientists, we had solved the problem, and we have really good drones, we had now good missiles, and many other good things, and due to our technologies, due to our scientists, and it's a matter of crucial, really, value, because it's a matter of our national safety. It's a matter of our existence, because Russia all the time supported its science very strongly, just from the view of military aspects.
Yeah, we can be only powerful in case of scientists cooperate with the militants, and probably media should help you in this to promote our scientists. Media should help.
That's what's a very great problem as well, because generally in the last decades, media was not interested in the matter of sciences. We had no scientific programs on TV, on radio. We had no scientific pages on in the main newspapers. The audience had no idea that we still have really very good scientists with very good ideas and successful solutions. It's bad, because in every good country there is a powerful sector in media which gives public some good idea of what is going on. And it's very interesting. As for me, it's very interesting to know something on technologies and modern development. We had nothing of this kind. Now the matters are changing, but not in really. That's not enough.
Well, then I'm really glad that we are having this conversation right now. And you mentioned that Ukraine's science is lacking of financing. So then, who is usually financing the work except of the state? Because as far as I understand, state's finances are not enough.
Well, generally, there are in every country there are different channels of funding. The state funding, mainly for fundamental researchers, for basic researchers in different fields, applied researchers, which are funded in many cases, of course, by business. and funding through international programs, international grants, etc. In Ukraine, formally, we have a very similar situation, but the present situation in Ukrainian business, of course, is not very good. And in many cases, Ukrainian business structures have no concern in funding researchers. In many cases, it's either for them to buy some old-fashioned Western technologies, Chinese technologies now,
and do not invest
and
for
not to invest
inventing
in.
the new
Therefore,
ones.
we need some tools really to make them invest. Similar solutions were taken in many countries, for example in Poland, and it's quite obvious that we should use our potential. And the international programs. Of course, we are involved in international cooperation, and that's very important for us because, first of all, it's a chance for us to use modern equipment, which unfortunately now we have not here in Ukraine. And then it's really a chance for us to bring some new money in our R&D system, and probably you know that in Horizon 2020, I can say that we are very successful, but at least we get 2 times as much as we pay as our fee, although it's a reduced fee to the budget of the program in Brussels. We are effective in cooperation with the Science for Peace and Security program of NATO. For recent years, we have got approximately 10 million euros for equipment, for experimental equipment within this program for Ukrainian teams. We are effective in cooperation within CERN. You know, it's a very impressive example of international cooperation in nuclear physics, and everybody probably have heard about the Large Hadronic Collider, and the first paper, in the first paper about Higgs boson, there were also a group of Ukrainian collaborators.
Well, this is very surprising that actually it looks like Ukraine, the state, doesn't really support the scientists, but looks like our scientists and researchers draw a lot of interest from the international science and research community, and that is at least that is a good thing. Well, still, I have a lot of questions to ask you, but just unfortunately, right now we run out of time, and I would like to invite you for another conversation soon. And for now, thank you so much for this interesting conversation and this interesting information that you shared with us.
Thank you.
That was Maxym Strikha, Deputy Minister of Education and Science. Thank you for staying with UATV.